Practice International. And it's an absolute delight that you are all here with us and that you are interested in the topic. And it tells me that it's actually an important topic because we had a lot of people saying they'd like to come. My name is Serge Schroder. With Restorative Practice International. I'm also a practicing mediator with the Neighbourhood Justice Centre in Naarm in Melbourne. And let me start with an acknowledgement of country. And I'd like to acknowledge the traditional owners of the lands on which we are all gathered, whether that is in Australia or in other places. And I am talking to you from the lands of the Wurundjeri and Boonwurrung peoples in Naarm. In Wurundjeri, the traditional welcome is Wominjeka, and I extend that to all of you. And I also already saw that my colleague Zion has already given us a wonderful welcome, Wunyanyalam in Kabi Kabi. So I just want to acknowledge all the lands on which you are and the First Nations peoples that have owned these lands for such a long time. I acknowledge their elders, past and present. I acknowledge their ongoing and unbroken connection to culture and law and to their creation spirits. And I ask that the spirits of the ancestors guide our discussion and our learning today. Thank you very much. And let me also very briefly introduce my wonderful co-presenters and also post a slight apology from my colleague Shiv, who is running slightly late, but she will be with us very shortly. So Melanie, Schroder, Shiv, Martin, and I were all practicing mediators. So I work very much in the neighborhood community space, in particular with escalated neighborhood conflicts and personal safety intervention orders. Melanie works a lot in the child protection and family space, and is also a founder of suicide programs. So does a lot of work in suicide prevention. And Shiv is an expert in human resources, workplace conflict. You may know her from a lot of training and discussion around conciliation practices. So we hope that we bring sort of a fair bit of practical experience to today's session. I also want to briefly say that it's not a therapeutic session, so none of us are necessarily practicing therapists, but what we want to hopefully offer are some strategies to recognize the pressures that we all work under, and also some personal and best practice strategies on how to deal with these pressures, because I think we're all in a very difficult place at the moment, and I want to acknowledge that right at the start. Let me just bring up some slides that we have. Hang on. There we go. I hope you can all see that. So the title of our webinar is Staying Hopeful in Challenging Times and Recognizing the Impact of Our Work and Ways to Look After Ourselves. And I might just kick off by making some general remarks around that, because I do believe we live in not just interesting but extremely challenging times at the moment. And as I said, the reason that you're all here, that so many people were interested, tells me that that it's not just me and my colleagues who are feeling what's going on at the moment. So the question that I want to pose is kind of what is happening to our world, and where are we at the moment? And I just want to acknowledge that that it seems like a lot of the structures, the processes, the governance systems, the support that we've been used to, that we may have grown up with wherever we grew up, are not working the way that they used to work any longer. It used to be that crises happen in some sort of sequence, but at the moment, crises seem to happen all over the place, all at the same time. Whether that's the cost of living, whether that's the war in Gaza, whether that's COVID or the after effects and the long-term effects of COVID, whether that's a severe and significant loneliness that people suffer, homelessness. I don't know where to start and stop talking about these issues, and I think the support services and probably the services that you and I work with are to some degree stretched to the limit. I've never seen as many clients suffering from severe mental health disorders and absolute desperation as I have now. And so that must have an impact on all of us. And I know there's a lot of dispute resolution services, for example, in the family area that are having extremely high turnover of staff, issues of burnout. There many of the places of refuge and support that we're working in are not coping well anymore. So the question is, what can we do? How can we sustain what we have, and how can we sustain ourselves in that situation of ongoing, escalating, and overlapping crises? And I think everyone is aware of budget cuts and staffing redeployment in their organizations, and where does that leave sort of our practice? So I just want to acknowledge that possibly many of you are experiencing some of that, and that it's really difficult to work and to deliver good work under these conditions. So hopefully we've got some strategies today to sustain ourselves and to also recognize the signs of when we need help from others. I did a bit of Googling to find some definitions for what I hope to some degree comes out of today, and that is the ideas around hope and resilience. So in light of all of these crises, how can we actually nurture some hope for a better future? So hope is the wish for a particular event that one considers possible, even if the possibility is small. It's about having confidence and having trust. So having an expectation and firmly believing that that expectation can actually come true, to expect with confidence. And resilience is the ability to cope with, adapt to, respond, and recover from adverse events and circumstances. So that's what we're trying to nurture and trying to find out what are ways how we can actually remain hopeful. And because I think when I teach mediation and conflict resolution, I often say that that pretty much everyone I encounter who comes to me is in a place where they miscommunicate, where they're angry or frustrated, where they're afraid and uncertain, where they're extremely stressed. And I think one of the key abilities of a conflict resolver in whatever field we work in is to actually give these people a glimpse of hope, that there is some sort of light at the end of the tunnel, that if we can go through a particular process, or if we can relate to each other a little bit better, if we can build some understanding, then we can work through these challenging times and potentially even strengthen the relationships that we think that are broken or impaired. And so I think we need to find ways to instill that hope and to help people see that it's not all doom and gloom. But to do that, we also need to do it ourselves. We need to have that hope, and we need to pass that on. So I'm sure many of you, this is why you do that work, because you carry an optimism in yourself. You have a wonderful care for people and a wish to help them build better relationships and deal with the stresses of everyday life a little bit better. I would encourage you to actually, if you got some questions or some comments, to put them in the chat. I'm not going to talk for that much longer, and then I'm going to hand over to my wonderful colleague Mel, and I'm going to monitor the chat. And I'd love to also take some of your questions and your comments and highlight them for everyone so that we can have a little bit of a conversation. We're a fairly large group of people, so it's probably not going to work to go around a circle, even though I'd love to do that. But we'll need to work a little bit with the technology that we have. I hope that's okay with everyone. Now, Um, I've acknowledged already how difficult the situation is, and we don't want today's webinar to be in any way sort of a depressing and terrible event. So I just wanted to start, even though we talk more about that at the end, with some personal strategies that I find useful to keep some of that hope alive, and to also start signposting some of the issues where we may need to talk to others and actually get help. And this could be help from friends, support networks, and family, or from our wonderful pets and other creatures that help us, or it could be seeking professional help. So for me, I've noticed over the last few years in particular that that the strategies that I use to keep my hope alive, to keep an optimistic and positive mood, is in particular talking to friends, professionals, and peers. And I think COVID has to some degree put up a barrier to us doing that. I think a lot of us have become more isolated and talk less, or at least talk more online and less in person. For me personally, it's really important to engage with people, to tell the stories that actually bear me down, that I find difficult, that make me angry or irate, and to have someone, a friendly ear, listen to that. For me, it's also important to recognize where I can make a difference and where I can't, and to identify what I call sort of circles of influence in which I can make a difference. Because it's really difficult for any of us to change the terrible things that are currently taking place in the United States, for example. The complete disestablishment of US aid and the thousands of people that are dying every day because important humanitarian aid projects can't be delivered any longer. So possibly none of us in this meeting is able to really change that, particularly not overnight. But we all have other circles of influence in our work. And I think that's why we're doing this work, where we can make a difference. I think helping one person and restoring one relationship is already something that at least gives me a wonderful push towards the next day to get up and do it again, and also deal with the matters where it doesn't work. And the third one really comes from today, where I was reminded of that, engaging with hopeful examples of our work and sharing through reflective practice as peers with each other. So today I had the opportunity with some of my lovely colleagues who are actually in this webinar to visit a really beautiful restorative school in Melbourne, and to hear the really thoughtful and deliberate sort of design of that school and its philosophy and what kind of difference it makes, and to hear about some of the difficult matters that have come up, but also the wonderful successes that have come up. And it's something that I have nothing to do with, but hearing that story and seeing that school and seeing the young people who were there actually really filled my bucket. And that's exactly what the principal said when he was talking with us. So engaging with our peers, with our networks, and sharing actually stories that sustain us is a wonderful way to keep that hope alive. And then the other part is also recognizing when things don't work so well. So what are the signs that you need help from others? When you feel down, when you don't want to go to work, when you doubt yourself, when you second guess your practice, when you wake up at night and constantly worry about work, the world, your family. I think these are signs that at some stage, when this builds up more and more and more, we need help from others. And we're gonna move over to that, and I'm gonna ask my wonderful friend Melanie to take over now and actually start talking a bit about some of the most common effects of stress and how they particular sort of appear in our practice.
Hi, and lovely to see you all. I'm coming to you from Quandamooka country in Brisbane, and I too would like to pay my respects to elders past and present and acknowledge anyone who identifies with us today. We are in really uncertain worlds, and I think, as Margie said in the chat, really unpredictable space. And so we're just going to talk a little bit about the effects of stress. And I just want to note when we're talking about stress, they're those macro stresses, they're those big stresses. Is my job secure? How are my finances doing? What's my health doing? But then there are also those little micro stresses that occur that just build up over time, those tiny little things that happen and eventually unravel us. So I want to talk firstly about burnout, if I can. We're going to go through these four definitions. I think they are thrown around in our sector, or in our world, quite intertwined, but really are different and have different impacts on us. So I want to talk a little bit about burnout. And the way I'd like to do that, I'm sure if I asked for a show of hands as to who burnt out over their career at some point, whether now or in the past, I'd get a fair number, myself included. And when I started in the sector, I think burnout was really seen as I don't know, an initiation, a part of how we join the group. I don't know. But thank God, and I'm hoping it has changed as broadly as I've seen it change. But I'm going to go through a 12-stage process of burnout. And as I go through each step, I'd like you to just, when I get to the number that you think you are, hold it in the back of your head for a moment. When I'm talking about burnout, I'm talking about, and each of us will reach this individually, but just a space where there's nothing left, a space where it feels like it's Groundhog Day. Some of us become completely depleted, other of us become really angry, some of us just get that massive brain fog. We will all journey through this in different ways. But let me go through the 12 steps and just see where you're at currently. So the first of the steps, and again, just to caveat this, given that we have changed so markedly with working from home and our work lives and our personal lives intertwining the way they are, I am going to speak to burnout specifically from a work perspective. So stage one is, oh my God, I got the job. They picked me. This is fantastic. I can't believe I was successful. God, I'm so excited. Let's go. Number two, number three is my learning curves like that. The group, the team I'm working with are phenomenal. I'm happy to work through lunch. I'm happy to pick up extra shifts. I'm just thriving. I'm really buzzing on what's happening for me right now. Number four, number five is yes, absolutely. The work that we're doing is important, but I didn't realize what a small cog in what a big, potentially broken machine we are and making a difference. But, and the other side of number four, number five is I don't need acknowledgement. Like I'm getting fed from the work I'm doing, but God, it wouldn't hurt if just once somebody said, hey, good job, well done. Thanks for picking that shift up or that client up, or not, I don't need it, but it wouldn't hurt. Number, I don't know where I am, five or six is, yeah, no, I'm not going to work through my lunch. I'm actually going to start taking my lunch because it doesn't matter how hard I work, the work is still sitting there and it still builds. And maybe this organization, even though passionate, may be a little bit more interested in funding than they are in clients potentially. Number seven, number eight is I am going to start pulling a couple of mental health days because you know what? I'm tired. I'm really physically, emotionally tired. This work has a cost. I'm starting to have a few issues in my personal life because I'm tired. And yeah, couple of mental health days, whether I'm pulling sickies or whether I'm asking for them, wouldn't go astray right now. Where am I? 8. Number 9 is I might be at work, but am I at work? That presenteeism where I'm just sort of doing the Groundhog Day, getting through stuff, not really achieving as much as I should. Number 8, number 9 is serious fractures at home. People starting to comment on me maybe becoming a little bit belligerent, my self-care starting to go out the window. It's often at about 8 or 9 where I start thinking about perhaps going to see a doctor. Do I need an iron injection? I don't know, sleeping tablets, just something to help me function better. Number 10, number 11 is I am now really struggling in my personal life. I'm not doing the things that used to fill me because they're just another goddamn thing I have to do. I'm not connecting with the people that fill me because you know what? I talk to people all day. I don't want to talk to people. I am feeling quite nauseous, if not being nauseous at the thought of going to work. I'm starting late, I'm finishing early, I'm taking longer lunches. I'm just not wanting to be there. Number 11, number 12 is a diagnosis of a mental health concern and or suicidal ideation. It's just complete depletion. So when we talk about burnout, it's not a badge of honor. Like it took me just a little self-disclosure, it probably took me a good 12 months to be able to get back into the workforce in a really meaningful way. So if you're at 7 or above, I'd like to say just hit pause. Just figure out, just take a moment, speak to somebody, hit pause, take a break, see whether you can implement things to give you that joy and that meaning back, or whether this job that you're in right now is a good fit. And if you know someone who's 7 or above, tap them on the shoulder, have a chat to them, because I think by the time we reach that point, we lose sight of the leaves for the trees. So that's burnout. Serge.
Thank you. I think the other 3 that we've got on this slide are very much also related, and all of these effects of stress interrelate, and they build up, and some are stronger in some people, and some are less strong in others. So I'll talk a little bit about vicarious trauma. It's the negative transformation in the helper that results across time from empathic engagement with trauma survivors and their traumatic material, combined with a commitment or responsibility to help them. And I presume many of you are probably hearing some very traumatic and traumatizing stories and issues from clients, and over time that has an impact on us. At the beginning, maybe, yeah, we don't take it home, but over time it builds up, and there are these feelings of anger, rage, sadness at someone else's story, at someone else's pain that we're experiencing, particularly if they go through these cycles and tell us about this pain again and again. And what happens is that that some of us can become overly emotionally attached to that. So feeling similar anger or pain, experiencing bystander guilt or shame, feelings of self-doubt, working even harder than we actually should, and taking on more than we should, or raging at the injustice that people are suffering. It's a form of over-identification with clients where we take on their stories, and I think I'm I can't say guilty, but I'm experiencing that. I am deeply angry sometimes when I see how, in particular, clients are treated by governments and services, and where there is a lack of listening, where there's a lack of empathy. I mean, probably many of us, if we think about all the reporting around the robo-debt scandal and its different variations, that's something that can certainly, at least for me, um, develop some form of vicarious trauma. Vicarious trauma is also when we take our experiences from work outside work, when we're suddenly afraid of certain groups of people, because in our work, I don't know, as police officers or others, we consistently engage with the pathological cases and we develop sort of fixations on that that certain people are dangerous because of past experiences. So I think that's something to monitor because it can really impact on us, and it can very easily bleed outside the work. It bleeds into our personal relationships. It bleeds into the way we engage with others. It colors our impressions of new people whom we may meet and whom we always judge based on the particular workplace experiences that we have. Can also create distancing, numbing, detachment. So a lot of what Mel's going to talk about in a minute around compassion fatigue is also part of that. Some people sort of overreact and overwork and almost manically try to help. Others have the opposite effect and distance themselves or try to find other ways to drown out the trauma that they've taken home from work, whether that's through substance abuse or video games or watching TV. So it's this constant sort of underlying engagement with the traumatic experiences that we suffer from. Mel, do you want to take over and talk a little bit about compassion fatigue, which I think is very, very closely connected to vicarious trauma?
Sure. Thanks, Serge. Compassion fatigue. I mean, I think I feel extraordinarily blessed to do the work that I do and very privileged to walk alongside some of the clients I walk alongside. But I think we need to recognize that the work we do does have a cost. There is a toll to that. And I mean, to use the old analogy of the bucket, we reach into the bucket and we give and we give and we give. And then we go home and we give some more. And then hopefully we're part of a community and we give some more. But one day we reach into that bucket and we hit bottom. There's nothing left. And for me, the definition that sits best for me when it comes to compassion fatigue is soul weariness. It's just I'm depleted. So when I think of compassion fatigue, I often see it as a spectrum. On the one hand is those people that I'm sure have all worked with that just I've seen this, I've done this, I've ridden this horse, nothing's going to touch me. They just almost build up these brick walls where they can hear or experience or witness the most insanely emotional things without any semblance of empathy. So on the one hand, I feel nothing. I've got nothing left to give. And then on the other end of the continuum, I often see compassion fatigue as, honest to God, if I hear one more sad story, I'm going to curl up in a fetal position and rock myself to sleep. I just can't bear witness to any more pain. So again, compassion fatigue, we may end up on one or the other unless we are cognizant of putting back into that bucket. And lucky last surge is moral injury.
I think that's also something that I do believe I experience quite often. And I think a lot of us who work, particularly for government services, might experience at least some of it. So moral injury is defined as a psychological distress which results from actions or the lack of them, which violate your moral or ethical code. For example, due to a lack of resources, a humanitarian aid worker may be unable to provide adequate health care to all of their clients. So I think we all have experienced issues where we like to help or where we see a particular problem, and then either legislation or policies of our organization forbid us to do what needs to be done, for example, what forbids us for what we feel innately is the right thing to do. And that creates this incredible tension within us because I know what I want to do and feel what I could do, but I'm not allowed to do it. Or the service or whoever it is kind of forces me to act against my own moral compass, and that makes us really really sick. It is something particular over time. If it happens more often, that makes us again doubt our own processes, our own procedures, but also who can, over a sustained period of time, work against their own moral compass. And I've experienced that quite a bit with working with different governments and different places where I felt that, in particular with regards to, for example, listening to the voices of First Nations peoples, there is such significant systemic racism in some government departments and institutions that consistently the voices of First Nations peoples are being drowned out and not listened to at all. And if I'm then asked to facilitate a process that allows everyone to have a voice, a restorative process, for example, or a mediation, but I can clearly see that often the government department is the one that is hosting, funding, paying me, and they systematically attempt to exclude some discussions or create a particular taboo about certain topics that can't be discussed, but they're important for the other people involved. So I don't know how you deal with that. I find that deeply concerning, and that's stuff that I definitely take home, and that makes me incredibly angry, upset, and not wanting to often engage in these processes any further. But it's again trying to then built a little bit of space where some of the voices that are being drowned out can have a chance to speak and shine. I think our colleague Shiv has arrived, and this is very perfect timing because moral injury and what I've just started to talk about often is in the context of working within organizations and larger institutions. And Shiv is going to talk more about the kind of institutional context. So we talked so far a lot about sort of personal effects on us and how they impact on our enjoyment of work, but also our health and well-being in particular. But there's more than the personal context. There's also the organizational context that we work in and questions around how our organizations are keeping us safe or not. So Shiv, you're there, aren't you? Can I hand over to you now? Is she there? She just came in. Let me see.
I think she may have dropped out again, Serge.
Drop down again. All right. Yeah. Okay. Let me just quickly send her a message.
Happy for you to go to slide 14 if that's helpful.
Okay.
And
Yeah,
then
we can
I
do
can,
that.
because that fits in here as well.
We'll move on and then we'll come back to this a little bit later. And I'll hand over to you again. There you go. Is that the one or?
Yep, that'll do me.
All right.
I think so positive psychology, there's a lot of psychology, a lot of theories, a lot of processes out there now. But I wanted to just talk to Seligman around why there's some theories as to why we may or may not be coping or happy or comfortable in the environments in which we're in. And he speaks about the hedonic adaptation. So we all strive so hard to be happy. We all strive to find that level of more, I guess. But the problem is we do habituate to our environment. So we will strive to get to a point where we're happy, but then we have to keep adding to that to keep the same feeling. That's the adaptation. So that becomes our norm, and then we try and create more. Seligman says that 10% of our happiness is actually predicted from our situation, what we have, and 90% of it is from how we think and what we do. It comes from more what's happening in here rather than what's happening in here. And for those of you that, like me, do struggle with materialism at times, I think that speaks to itself. So I just want to, if I'm okay, before we drop into Shiv, Serge, if we can just drop to the next slide.
Of course, okay. Sure.
Something that I think changed and I do apologize for the picture, that's shocking, but something that I think changed my view of how am I feeling is I do work in the mental health space a lot. I work with people who have diagnoses, be those chronic, lifelong, be those episodic, be those one-off situations where life just throws us a little bit too much that we can cope with. But the thing that I've always struggled with is I know some people who live with extraordinarily challenging mental health conditions and yet are living the best, most fulfilled lives, are really achieving and hitting that space of joy. And then I know and have in my personal life and have worked with some people that are not living with a mental health condition and yet are just waking up blah every day. Just there's no joy or fulfillment. And I had a look at the mental health, mental illness, mental well-being spectrum, right? It's the spectrum of on this side, I'm mentally unwell, I'm living with a diagnosis, I'm really struggling. And then on this side, it's I'm doing really well, I'm living my best life, I am well. And we oscillate along that depending on how we're feeling, what's happening in our lives, what's going on, etc. And if we look at a lot of the sort of government department health websites, it's we must eat well, we must sleep well, we must get enough exercise, we must do all of these physical things to stay as well as we can, possibly can, mentally as well as physically. And then I found this model and I thought, well, hold on a minute. There is actually another continuum that I think we need to consider when it comes to how are we feeling, how are we traveling? And that's the flourishing, languishing one. So Corey Keyes says that flourishing when people are in the zone, basically, when people experience positive emotions, psychological functioning most of the time, right? In the zone, I'm buzzing, I've met my purpose, I have my meaning. Languishing, on the other hand, is that Groundhog Day. It's that sense of apathy, restlessness, or feeling unsettled. It's just that waking up going, oh, another day, awesome. What's it going to bring me? And then I thought about it. Yes, we absolutely categorically need to manage our mental well-being. But if we look at the languishing and flourishing, maybe we need to, and I don't know how else to phrase this, but maybe we need to ensure that we look after our souls with equal intent. Do those things that fill our souls, do those things that give us meaning, do those things that really fulfill us, as well as trying to stay physically and mentally as well as we can. And Corey Key says having a sense of self-acceptance, having those positive relationships, having a connection to your personal growth, albeit in a work perspective or in a personal perspective, but that growth, having purpose and working towards a living with your purpose, and then a sense of autonomy. are the things that will move us from languishing to flourishing. So we will drop into this after Shiv has spoken, but yeah.
Thanks for joining us, Shiv. Great to have you here. I'll just spotlight you as well.
Great. Can you hear me okay?
There we go. Yes.
You can hear me. Thank you. Thanks. I apologize for being late. I had a little bit of a mix-up on my end, but I'm joining everyone from Meanjin in Brisbane, the Convention and Exhibition Centre. So this is such an important conversation for me, and I'm so happy to hear what Mel has been talking to us about in terms of keeping track of where we are in that matrix. And a lot of the work that I've been doing, particularly since COVID, has been helping teams, particularly in conciliation, complaints handling, in ombudsman offices and tribunals, around setting up spaces and time in workplaces to take care of their well-being. And I think in conflict work, some of us work independently as mediators, as coaches, conflict practitioners, and others work in teams within organizations. And there is an overlap in terms of workplace responsibilities to us when we are conflict managers and complaints handlers and dispute resolvers. And so we have to think through those frameworks as well in this conversation. And so one of the things that I've been focusing on is how we take stock of our well-being at work and thinking about who's responsible. And we won't have much time, or we're not here to talk about the organisational piece, but certainly the individual piece and the team piece are enormously important to reflect on, including the team piece, because in my experience, what I've seen is the teams that are doing well have enormous volumes, enormous challenges, but there is a culture of reflection, there is a culture of debriefing and support, and there is there's always time to have a conversation. So that's one piece that I found really important to reflect on. Curious, because I've just jumped in and I can see lots of familiar names and faces here, but I wondered if in the chat box, you could tell me whether you work on your own or you work in a team. Just in the chat box, let me know, on my own or team. Team. Yes. Great. Great. Look at you all. Amazing. Fabulous. Lovely. Hi, Richard. I'm recognizing some of your names there. Lovely. So look, this is going to be, for those of you that do work in teams and organizations, this is going to be, hi, Emil, going to be so familiar for you, which is that when you're in a team, you have the responsibilities to yourself, but you also have responsibilities to your team. When you hear each other having those conversations, checking in, when you notice your buddy a little quieter than usual, identifying that early and having those direct conversations. I think that we don't leave it to chance and wait to look for those cues. I think we put in time in our schedules, assuming we'll need that conversation. Keen to hear if it's okay for me to open up the conversation a little bit. Those of you that are working in teams, can you tell us, happy for you to hop off mute, have you set up any systems or any rituals in your workplace to help with this reflective practice? Things that you'd love to share with the group? Sure you have. I'm going to put some names in the on Richard because I know you. Putting a spotlight on you. Richard, what do you think?
Oh my goodness, Shiv, you've caught me out. I'm I'm cooking dinner.
Oh, that's okay. I feel bad. Don't worry about it, Richard. Nice to
Um,
see you online.
No, that's all right. I'm happy to talk about some of the things that we have at work that help. Um, I guess, and I think there are a few other members from the team here who hopefully won't think that I'm slaughtering things. But we, I guess, whenever we're coming together, we're trying to find an opportunity to genuinely connect and
Yes.
to bring a piece of ourselves. So, and to kind of do that in an explicit way with check-in circles and other things. But I guess we have a range of forums where that sort of thing can occur. So we have, boring things like team meetings, but we also have peer supervision. We also have group development, where
Yep.
there's opportunities to look at group maintenance. And then I guess beyond the group, we also create opportunities for people to seek support in other ways, including through external supervision. So obviously people can be looking at their practice challenges in that environment, but they could also be looking at wellbeing challenges that they're having too, or just
Yeah.
communicating in a way that supports wellbeing.
Yes. Yes. And what I'm hearing is, and I noticed Margie's comment there too, is that it doesn't have to be explicitly about well-being. You don't have to explicitly debrief about that challenging conversation or individual. It's just the opportunity to connect. And if you want to talk about that, we can, but also we can just have a chat. I love Zion. Do you want to hop on and talk us through the scheduled informal? I love that. It's scheduled but informal, structured but unstructured.
Yeah, absolutely. We actually set
Yeah.
aside time each week where we will sometimes twice a week actually, where we catch up as an entire team just over a cup of tea. There's no agenda. We just shoot the breeze about what's been going on during the week and talk
Yeah.
about some complex complaints that we've dealt with, but sometimes just get the monkeys off their back, you know.
Yeah. Yeah. And it's not a waste of time. And I think this is where this framework and having it as a psychosocial hazard and in the new codes, and some of you might be familiar with all the attention to mental health and well-being from a legal and risk management perspective, is not a bad thing, because those coffee chats, those informal chats, are actually not someone wasting time or procrastinating. It's actually enormous value to those of you that work in teams. Any other thoughts, Margie? Did you want to add more to connect before content?
So, look, it's a critical part of our normal everyday gathering. We're all involved in some sort of task or other, but in the West, I think we're too inclined to get on with the task without doing the equivalent piece of checking in to see if people are ready for the task, really. In the school settings, we talk about whether or not people have enough bandwidth, and it's just a kindness more than anything. But there is
Yes.
nothing
Yep.
more compelling than having someone truly interested in me for a nanosecond. And we have other language for that too in the school setting, and it's called a touch point. So for the
Yeah.
greeting, for the check-in, it is simply for a nanosecond, that other person is the center of our universe. There we go.
Yeah, that's great. Love it. Thank you. We might flick on to the next slide. I can see this. Mel, do you want to go back to the comment? I can see you unpacking that in more detail. I want to talk about that some more.
Oh, Shiv, I think I could talk about that. We just the comment I made around moral injury. I think we could spend the rest of the session talking about that. I'm happy to post. I'm just conscious we've only got another, I don't know, 40 minutes. So
Yeah.
I'm more than happy to share materials with RPI to sort of send to those who are interested. I've got reams. So
Yep. Awesome. Thank you. I'm just keen to hear everyone else's thoughts. I was like, who can I put on the spotlight to keep talking? But I've got so much to share on this topic. But I think this is some of the research I've done when I've been helping teams build resilience. So I'm not sure if we went through the definition of resilience already, but what we are aiming for in our practices as conflict managers, as peace builders, is to build resilience. And resilience is the ability to bounce back from adversity. And I've been interested in understanding how teams build organisational and team resilience as well, because there are many of the teams that I'm working with enormous backlogs, enormous challenges, funding challenges, all sorts of external factors. And what are the things that make those teams resilient versus threaten their resilience and threaten them into burnout, whether individually or as a huge team turnover as well? And one of the big things I've noticed in the research is this concept of role clarity, and it being a significant predictor of both depression and burnout. And what I know in conflict work is that role clarity is sometimes very hard to come by. The measures that we have in our workplaces don't necessarily tell us when we've done a good job, when the job's done. We're not sure if we could have done more. Could we have asked that question? Is it time to walk away from it? Should we do another follow-up? Even before a mediation, should we do another intake process? And I know myself, I have struggled with this as a mediator, where I've thought, right, this process is over. In the back of my mind, I think, should I reach out to that person again? Should I check in on them? Actually, is there actually capacity for resolution here, or should we wrap it up? And many times, I know myself, I've been kept up at night thinking through, how much more do I do? Is my job done? Have I done enough? Have I done a good job? And these are really hard questions for us. And so I think it's worth us reflecting on the role clarity that we have in our jobs. And role clarity is a couple of things for me. One is, what is my job and what isn't? Yeah. Is this in the things I'm responsible for, accountable for? Is it not? So it's like the scope. The second part is the measuring of success. Have I done a good job or not? And I have to say that in particular really challenges me, because in many cases we don't get resolutions, right? That's not to say we haven't done a good job, but how are we measuring ourselves? So these things, they are actual predictors of burnout and depression. So from a research perspective, these things put us at risk. The lack of role clarity. So another question to the group is, thanks, Margie. Yeah, it's about predictability, and that's what our brains need, right? We're looking for patterns, knowing when to. I think, and working in environments with low role clarity, it's always been about switching off. When have I done enough for today? When can I shut down my computer and stop thinking about this and focus on my family and myself? And so this is a challenge, and I wonder if there's anyone in the group who's happy to share whether they've hacked this, whether they found a way to provide themselves with more role clarity in their conflict work, any structures, frameworks you've put in place, or an emoji if you relate to this. Give me a heart react.
Look, I'm happy just to share a small pathetic thing I do every night when I'm home, and that is when it comes close to dinner time, I literally close the door in my office and lock that part of the house up, so I'm not tempted to go down after dinner.
Yeah,
it's very small, but it has made a difference, I think.
Yeah. And you've hit a really important point there around working from home and remote work, because of course it's enormously valuable. But does that make this even harder still? Because maybe we can always work, we can always send an email, we can always reread a letter. Any other thoughts on this one? No? Might hop on to the next. Oh, go on.
No, I can jump in. Sometimes I worry if I'm off the right track here, but I use the worry tree a lot. So, for example, if I find myself going over and over things that I'm working through at school or tempted to send an email, sometimes I just go through that process of naming the worry. Is this something that I can work through right now? And so I follow. If you Google image the worry tree, if you're not sure what I'm talking about, I just go through a process and eventually possibly get to a point where I can say, I know that this worry is here. I acknowledge the worry, but I'm just going to put it up on a shelf because right now I can't do anything more with it. And I've also recently just started reading Mel Robbins' Let Them, which is helping me just to acknowledge, okay, this is how I'm feeling. I acknowledge this is how they feel. Let them. Let me now move on, or let me do this and this to make myself feel comfortable with where this is currently sitting. I don't know if that's relevant. But yeah, that's what I've found is working.
I think they're awesome examples, and I think the learning is those frameworks are great. Maybe they're not frameworks others use, but it's about having frameworks in place for us to give ourselves those boundaries. I'm just looking at Zion's switch. Yep. Finding ways we can create that switch on, switch off. I wish I could do that, Zion. I'm not very good at this. I'm terrible at this. Do you know the other thing, though, with conflict work, with any sort of service that we provide to other people, is perhaps our roles are beyond just our professional roles and who we are as individuals, right? And that makes it harder still. And I reckon that's another 24 hours of conversation, isn't it, Mel? It's just smiling there. Maybe that's another conversation around that, because a lot of us bring our whole selves to this work, and then we're the same people outside of it as well. Yeah, great. Well, I might go on to the next slide. Feel free to play the Oscars music on me and sound me off, Serge. Just keep talking. This is my tool, right? This is the one. It's not my tool. It's actually a very old psychology tool that Stephen Covey made more famous in his 7 Habits of Highly Effective People. But I really enjoy this tool. The circles of concentric control. It's sort of thinking through the worry. It's a bit like the worry tree. What am I bothered about? And separating that bother into what in that bother has been within my control. This is why mediation, and this slide has come out of some of the reflections we do with mediators, which is why the process is usually helpful. You trust the process. You know, someone might be getting further and further away from resolution, saying things that you know are harmful and not constructive. But you just trust your process, and that's what you can control, and you move through that. And influence are the things that maybe, you know, timeliness, if you're managing complaints or disputes, maybe I can do this in a way that happens within a certain statutory or whatever time frame, but I can't control that. You know, there's factors outside of my control, and there's no point me worried at night or trying to fight against the tide if those factors are outside of my control. And then there's a lot that we worry about that is not even within our control or influence. External factors, what's happening in politics, what's happening in the world, right? Those things affect us, and certainly, I'm sure for many of us, keep us awake. But again, it's, well, do I even have influence over this? Is this even worth me thinking through? I used to have this when I was a team manager in conflict. I used to have it stuck to the back of my door in my office, because I knew that whenever there was a closed door conversation with my team, I was going to need this tool. And it would be a visual cue for me to say, hold on a minute, whatever this conversation is about, just remember how much you can actually control and focus on that. So I wonder if anyone else uses this tool or has a different interpretation or use for it. Mel, I know you've come across this one. Have you seen it being used in different contexts?
I've seen this used, as you say, Shiv, in teams, but I've also seen people use this sort of in their personal life, and I've actually seen it used really, really well with young kids. Terminology changed a little bit, but yeah, no, heaps.
Yeah. So the other thing I've come across recent research, it's not in the slides, but some of you might have come across work by Dr. Carly Schroder, and she's done some research into judicial well-being. And what was really interesting that stuck with me with her research was this difference between the things that worry us that are intrinsic to our conflict work and the extrinsic factors. So if I'm feeling overwhelmed and stressed at work, is it because of the work, or is it extrinsic to work and something else in my life that has, you know, maxed out that bandwidth we were mentioning before? Any other thoughts on this one? Might skip to this next slide. I think this is pretty straightforward. It's a bit dated. Here we are doing this. I think the big thing with the virtual environment is this concept of work at our own time, which is brilliant for many reasons. But there's a good chance that when I need a debrief, when I'm ready for a chat, is not the right time for someone else. And this is what I think is the biggest challenge for debriefing and reflective practice in the virtual environment. It's not talking to a screen instead of in person. I think we've gotten much better at understanding how to interact on a screen, making sure the tech is ready, becoming more natural and communicating on a screen. It's that we don't know when the time's right. Because, you know, when we work in an office side by side or in that workplace where you can read those cues of when someone is available for a debrief, or someone actually might notice you've had a difficult time, or you run into somebody at a kitchen, you have those moments for reflective practice in a virtual environment. Those incidental moments are almost nil. And there's these other implications. I've done research around implications for creativity as well, when we don't have those incidental water cooler chats. And so we have to focus on ritualizing it when previously you might not have had to. The other thing is you don't have to sit in front of a computer screen. You can actually, if you've done a meeting on Zoom or a conciliation or conference on Zoom, you can actually walk away from the screen and pick up the phone and walk outside even. So these are little tools I've found important to actually remember to continue that level of reflective practice on a screen. I think they've done research in different workplaces where they measured how much time in an office people actually spent chatting to their colleagues versus working. And some workplaces, it was as low as 25% of the day was actually spent working versus 75% chatting to colleagues. Didn't impact output because that is the community, the sort of environment that's been created. Now, I wonder if those of you that are working from home in conflict work find themselves just working, and those incidental conversations are less, and then you have less time to reflect and decompress. And I certainly know that's a fact for me, that I don't have the same. If I'm in an office, I spend half the day having a yarn, right? And that has enormous value to my resilience in the work that I'm doing. Any thoughts on how you ritualize or, you know, force yourself to engage in reflective practice while working virtually? Any hacks that we could share with each other? Is anyone really active on the memes and GIFs on Teams? I know some groups of complaints handlers and conciliators with incredibly active chat groups on Teams with all sorts of interesting shares. Yeah. Some which management have tried to shut down, but I think there's huge value in keeping those conversations open. Yeah. Awesome. Well, I might hand back, Serge. Do I have another slide, or I think I'm handing back to Mel? No, back to positive. Yep. Go ahead, Mel.
I think we're handing back to Mel. Yeah. Mel, which slide do you want to be on? The next
If we can, we've done this one and the next one. So
that one? All right, there you
yep,
go.
beautiful. Thanks, Shiv. Big shoes to fill. I just again want to talk a little bit about how are we traveling and how do we know? I know Emil's not with us any longer, but how do we know whether we're okay or not okay? How do we know where we're at? And I found this, and I kind of just hold it in the back of my head to do a self-check for me. So it moves from thriving to crisis. Right. So thriving, I don't have any stresses in my life. Things are awesome. Like I'm buzzing. I'm doing really well. Healthy, I have minimal stresses in my life and I'm managing those. I'm doing well. This is life. Surviving, I'm coping. Struggling, oh my goodness. Can the world just stop for a little while and let me find my feet? And then crisis is all the balls are in the air and I'm not catching any of them. And I think, again, we will oscillate depending on, how we're feeling, how's our physical health, how's our world environment. But I think if we have a look at these, it's a good check-in. And I do it most days. It's just like, where am I? Where am I? Oh my God, it's a crisis day. Okay, what is it that I need to do for self? And how present can I be, not only for those that I work with, but for those that I work for? So doing that check-in on almost a daily basis. Shiv, you spoke about that reflective practice, which I think is really important. But I think also just checking in on self and doing that. How full is my bucket and what have I got to give? Not only to those that I work with, because this is very much focused on those that I work with, but what about when I come home? How much is left for those that I love? So just a little note to do a self-check-in. So are you thriving, healthy, surviving, struggling, or are you in crisis? And then it's about identifying some strategies to keep moving over to the left and stay as far left as you can. Next one, Serge. So as a way of sort of wrapping up today, I wanted to just talk a little bit about the PERMA model of well-being. Again, this comes a lot from the work that I quoted from Seligman, a lot from the positive psychology space. But Seligman said, I've got 5 on here, but I'm going to add a few more when we get to the next slide. Seligman said, in order to be as well as we can, we need to, I don't know if any of you have seen the social and emotional well-being wheel that's used for our First Nations people, but it's about recognizing that if I'm not doing well in certain aspects of my life, it is going to impact on other aspects of my life. If I'm not connected to country and culture, if I'm not connected to kin, if I've lost my connection to nature or I'm not connected to self, I'm not going to be traveling that well. And I think what Seligman's done through this model is looking at a very similar thing. We need to have positive emotions some of the time. Okay, we need to have a concept of engagement, either being in the flow. I was watching someone creating a piece of pottery the other day, and I was so extraordinarily jealous because this person was not on this planet. They were so absorbed in what they were doing. And I know my partner says sometimes when I'm looking at theory or developing something, he just goes, I can talk to you 15 times and you don't hear a word that I say. That engagement, that focus, that purpose. Having positive relationships. We are, Margie absolutely will share that as well. I've got a note. We are a pack animal. We need others in order to thrive. There was research done, a well-being survey that's put out every 4 years. And what they've identified is one of the main reasons we are becoming so mentally unwell is isolation and a sense of loneliness. Albeit that compounded by the virtual world that we live in, or albeit that we all now live on our phones, or whatever the case may be, but having those positive connections, relationships in our life. Having a sense of meaning and purpose, I think we are, I hope I'm speaking for all of us, but we are extraordinarily blessed in finding work that gives us meaning. We are all extraordinarily blessed that at the end of the day, we can say, maybe, just maybe, I made a tiny difference to somebody. You know, and when I look at my colleagues that work in the corporate world, they don't get that. Their work is chasing the dollar. So it's about having that meaning, but holding that meaning, and not allowing it to dissipate through burnout. And then the last one is having a sense of accomplishment, whether that be looking at your adult children and just feeling incredible pride, or whether that be walking out of a meeting or a conciliation or a mediation or whatever it may be, and feeling that maybe, just maybe, I made a difference to that person. Or even though the result was not what they were hoping, I did the very best that I could. So having that sense of accomplishment and that constant hunger for growth. So if we're going to have a look at our well-being across a much broader spectrum than the medicalized model in which we live, love that, Zion, yep, a lack of culture, a lack of village, a lack of belonging. Serge, if we can move to the next slide, please. So just broadening out that PERMA model a little bit. We need those positive emotions. We need those moments of joy. We need those moments of, you know, I'm so sick of the toxic positivity of the world in which we now live, where we all should be grateful and we all should be joyful and, you know, blessed that. But we can find moments and really truly feel those positive emotions. Having a sense of engagement, either through the work that we're doing or through the people that we live with or love. Having those relationships, those meaningful relationships that feed us. Having meaning in the work that we do and the lives that we're living. Having a sense of achievement, as I've said before, feeling like we are growing, we are moving towards a positive space. Having good health, whether that be mental and or physical. Being connected to nature. I don't know. There's this whole thing now about being, you know, grounding, having a grounding mat under your bed. I don't know, just walk outside, take your shoes off, but having a sense and a connection to nature, and then having good sleep. So what I want to do is I just want to ask you to spend a moment, not to share, but just for self. Think about if this is you, if these are the elements of your life that make you well, or as well as you can be, moving toward that thriving space that we spoke about before. Just have a look at what's on the screen and think, are there two? Are there two that maybe you're not tracking that well in, or maybe you could improve in? You know, if I was doing this face to face, I'd have you score them from 1 to 10, but just nominate 2 for yourself. And as we do that, we're going to move to the next slide. So if you've chosen your 2, remembering what are we doing here? We're looking at our lives holistically. Yes, we may be working in organizations that aren't filling us, or yes, we may be a little bit burned out, or we may be struggling with our health, all of those aspects. But if you've chosen 2 that you'd like to improve in, the question I want you to ask yourself is, if positive emotions was 1, what makes you feel good? What fills your bucket? What brings a smile, be it external or internal, to your life, your world? If it's engagement, what gets you into the zone? What's your potter's wheel, for want of a better word? What just makes time fly without you having to think about it? Relationships, who brings you joy, peace, support? Who fills you? Meaning? What are things that are meaningful for you? What are things that give you purpose? Achievement? What do you want to achieve and when? TikTok. We get, what is it, 86,700 seconds a day? Or did I read 4,200 weeks on average? We're wasting time. So what do you achieve? What do you want to achieve and when? What do you need to do around your health to flourish? And I'm talking about physical as well as mental health. What's going to get you further up that scale we spoke about? How can you reconnect or connect to nature? How can you ground without buying a mat? I still can't get over that. I'm sure they work for all of those that have mats, but it just doesn't compute to me. And then sleep. How's your sleep? Are you rested? Do you wake up well? What do you need? So choose two of those, and I'd like at the end of the session for you to have a think about how do you move up? If it's a 0 to 10 and you're on a 3, how do you get to a 4 or a 5 in those two aspects of your life so that you have the resilience, the fortitude, the strength, enough in the tank, not only for yourselves, but for those who are going to need you next. And the next slide, Serge, is Ace Your Day. And I think I stole this from you, Shiv, but I use it every day. I actually have this on my wall. So Ace Your Day, every day, you need to do 3 things. What can you achieve? How do you connect? And what's going to energize you? So every day, think about how can you ace your day? What can you do for self? What can you do to continually put back into that tank so you're well, you're thriving, and those that love you have you, and those that need you, because I don't know about you, but my work's getting more and more and more complex and more and more and more overwhelming. Those that need you, you're going to be there for them. And that's all my words, Serge. So I'm going to hand back to you.
Thank you very much. I think we've come to the end of sort of our ideas, but we've got a couple of minutes left. So so if any one of you would like to add a comment or ask a question, now is a great opportunity for that.
Can I add one thing?
Hmm.
But I keen to hear. Oh, wait, there's one more message. Oh, Terry needs to leave. Bye, Terry. I was like, oh, there's a question, which is that in the work we do in conflict resolution and mediation, even as I support teams doing reflective practice or coaching, I think we hold ourselves to really high standards, and it's okay to not meet those standards. And like, I don't get enough sleep. I probably eat too many cheesels at 9 o'clock at night. I definitely don't make time for exercise like I should. If I'm busy, my catch-ups with my friends, the people I really love, are the first things to drop off. So, you know, I'm not great at those things, and I do as I say, not as I do, because I know what I should do and I don't. And I think that we have to be kind to ourselves because of the work we do. I think we put these pressures on ourselves to hold our beep together. But I'm not sure that's a good idea. I don't think that works. It's not something that works in the long run. And so that's just the last thing I want to leave with everyone is that it's okay not to tick off all those boxes. And I'm pretty sure it's okay to have cheesels at 9 o'clock, right, Mel? It's not quite on that ACE list, but I think that's okay now and then. And admitting that, yeah, I didn't sleep well last night at all. Yeah, I started doing some work at 9 o'clock and I didn't sleep. So, yeah, that's just the last thing I want to say. Even though here we are talking about these best practices, it's not so easy to do. If it was, I don't think any of us would be in this conversation. We'd all be forest bathing and hanging out with our besties and, you know, we'd be fine. So, yeah.
So I'd just like to make a comment rather than a question. It seems to me that well, I just know it for myself and for the people I hold. you know, with the deepest affection and love, that this is about keeping the body budget positive, to not be in a depleted state, because when we're depleted, it is too hard to maintain, you know, a positive outlook on anything, really. And so it does kind of take a discipline of sorts to stay in the green rather than the red, or the black instead of the red. But I think if we want to cope while things are so dark everywhere, that's the only possibility. Because I can't change anything in the States except to support my friends who live there. Yeah. There we go. That's all.
Thank
No,
you.
absolutely.
Any other thoughts?
Can I just
Yeah.
raise something that, I mean, in terms of my own research, the focus of my research was around everyday piece. And I find that concept of the everyday really helpful. But actually, it's what we do today that matters. I think that's where we can give ourselves appropriate responsibility. That's what I'm responsible for, is what am I doing right now? And that then takes away all of that unwarranted responsibility, the over responsibility that we can take on. You know, so the emphasis, the focus on the local, on the personal, on the embodied, on the everyday. Personally, I just find that reassuring and comforting, because the everyday matters.
Yeah.
Just to bring that.
Thanks, Terence. I could not agree more. I mean, that's kind of what fills my bucket every day, to do the little things and work in the places where I have some influence and where I can make a difference, and to get that smile from someone that you work with, or the appreciation that you have actually, I don't know, not necessarily changed someone's life, but made someone's life a little bit better. And I think it's such a privilege to do this work. It is such a privilege. Every day I wake up, I feel like I've got the best job in the world. It's pretty good. And I think with that, we might finish up. We hope that this filled your bucket a little bit. Thank you all for your contributions. It's been wonderful. And please keep an eye out for more RPI webinars and other gatherings, because we are very interested in keeping hope alive the whole year and beyond. And there will be more sessions that hopefully you'll join. Margie, do you want to say a few things at the end?
Well, I just wanted to thank Team Hopeful, really, for a terrific presentation and all the lovely screenshots I took of your wonderful slides. But you're right, it is a bucket filler. It's lovely to be with people who have an extraordinarily important purpose in life. And yeah, RPI will have a range of goodies for everyone during the year, so we'd love to see you back. We'd also love, if I'm allowed to plug, that you might consider becoming members of restorative-practices-international.com, all one word. There you go. So thanks, everyone. I might just stay behind for a moment and say hello. Sue, you will.